On one of the great moors over in Jutland, where trees won't grow because the soil is so sandy and the wind so strong, there once lived a man and his wife who had a little house and some sheep, and two sons who helped them to herd them. The elder of the two was called Rasmus, and the younger Niels. Rasmus was quite content to look after sheep, as his father had done before him, but Niels had a fancy to be a hunter, and was not happy till he got hold of a gun and learned to shoot. It was only an old muzzle-loading flintlock after all, but Niels thought it a great prize and went about shooting at everything he could see. So much did he practice that in the long run he became a wonderful shot, and was heard of even where he had never been seen. Some people said there was very little in him beyond this, but that was an idea they found reason to change in the course of time. The parents of Rasmus and Niels were good Catholics, and when they were getting old, the mother took it into her head that she would like to go to Rome and see the Pope. The others didn't see much use in this, but she had her way in the end. They sold all the sheep, shut up the house, and set out for Rome on foot. Niels took his gun with him. "What do you want with that?" said Rasmus. "We have plenty to carry without it." But Niels could not be happy without his gun, and took it all the same. It was in the hottest part of the summer that they began their journey, so hot that they could not travel at all in the middle of the day, and they were afraid to do it by night lest they might lose their way or fall into the hands of robbers. One day, a little before sunset, they came to an inn which lay at the edge of a forest. "We had better stay here for the night," said Rasmus. "What an idea!" said Niels, who was growing impatient at the slow progress they were making. "We can't travel by day for the heat, and we remain where we are all night. It will be long enough before we get to Rome, if we go on at this rate." Rasmus was unwilling to go on, but the two old people sided with Niels, who said, "The nights aren't dark, and the moon will soon be up. We can ask at the inn here and find out which way we ought to take." So they held on for some time, but at last they came to a small opening in the forest, and here they found that the road split in two. There was no signpost to direct them, and the people in the inn had not told them which of the two roads to take. "What's to be done now?" said Rasmus. "I think we had better have stayed at the inn." "There's no harm done," said Niels. "The night is warm, and we can wait here till morning. One of us will keep watch till midnight, and then waken the other." Rasmus chose to take the first watch, and the others lay down to sleep. It was very quiet in the forest, and Rasmus could hear the deer and foxes and other animals moving about among the rustling leaves. After the moon rose, he could see them occasionally, and when a big stag came quite close to him, he got hold of Niels' gun and shot it. Niels was awakened by the report. "What's that?" he said. "I've just shot a stag," said Rasmus, highly pleased with himself. "That's nothing," said Niels. "I've often shot a sparrow, which is a much more difficult thing to do." It was now close on midnight, so Niels began his watch, and Rasmus went to sleep. It began to get colder, and Niels began to walk about a little to keep himself warm. He soon found that they were not far from the edge of the forest, and when he climbed up one of the trees there, he could see out over the open country beyond. At a little distance he saw a fire, and beside it there sat three giants, busy with broth and beef. They were so huge that the spoons they used were as large as spades, and their forks as big as hay forks, and with these they lifted whole bucketfuls of broth and great joints of meat out of an enormous pot which was set on the ground between them. Niels was startled and rather scared at first, but he comforted himself with the thought that the giants were a good way off, and that if they came nearer he could easily hide among the bushes. After watching them for a little, however, he began to get over his alarm, and finally slid down the tree again, resolved to get his gun and play some tricks with them. When he had climbed back to his former position, he took good aim and waited till one of the giants was just in the act of putting a large piece of meat into his mouth. Bang! Went Niels' gun, and the bullet struck the handle of the fork so hard that the point went into the giant's chin instead of his mouth. "None of your tricks," growled the giant to the one who sat next to him. "What do you mean by hitting my fork like that and making me prick myself?" "I never touched your fork," said the other. "Don't try to get up a quarrel with me." "Look at it, then," said the first. "Do you suppose I stuck it into my own chin for fun?" The two got so angry over the matter that each offered to fight the other there and then. But the third giant acted as a peacemaker, and they again fell to their eating. While the quarrel was going on, Niels had loaded the gun again, and just as the second giant was about to put a nice tidbit into his mouth, bang! Went the gun again, and the fork flew into a dozen pieces. This giant was even more furious than the first had been, and words were just coming to blows when the third giant again interposed. "Don't be fools," he said to them. "What's the good of beginning to fight among ourselves when it is so necessary for the three of us to work together and get the upper hand over the king of this country? It will be a hard enough task as it is, but it will be altogether hopeless if we don't stick together. Sit down again, and let us finish our meal. I shall sit between you, and then neither of you can blame the other." Niels was too far away to hear their talk, but from their gestures he could guess what was happening, and thought it good fun. "Thrice is lucky," said he to himself. "I'll have another shot yet." This time it was the third giant's fork that caught the bullet and snapped in two. "Well," said he, "if I were as foolish as you two, I would also fly into a rage, but I begin to see what time of day it is, and I'm going off this minute to see who it is that's playing these tricks with us." So well had the giant made his observations that, though Niels climbed down the tree as fast as he could, so as to hide among the bushes, he had just got to the ground when the enemy was upon him. "Stay where you are," said the giant, "or I'll put my foot on you, and there won't be much of you left after that." To kill the giants, he thought, would be using the sword for the right. But as to winning the love of the princess, that was a thing which the son of a poor sheep farmer need not hope for. When Niels came to the gate of the castle, he found that there was a large door and a small one, so he opened the latter. "Can't you open the big door?" said the giants. "We shall hardly be able to get in at this one." "The bars are too heavy for me to draw," said Niels. "If you stoop a little, you can quite well come in here." The first giant accordingly bent down and entered in a stooping posture. But before he had time to straighten his back again, Niels made a sweep with the sword, and off went the giant's head. To push the body aside as it fell was quite easy for Niels, so strong had the wine made him, and the second giant, as he entered, met the same reception. The third was slower in coming, so Niels called out to him. "Be quick," he said. "You are surely the oldest of the three, since you are so slow in your movements, but I can't wait here long. I must get back to my own people as soon as possible." So the third also came in, and was served in the same way. It appears from the story that giants were not given fair play. By this time the day was beginning to break, and Niels thought that his folks might already be searching for him. So instead of waiting to see what took place at the castle, he ran off to the forest as fast as he could, taking the sword with him. He found the others still asleep, so he woke them up, and they again set out on their journey. Of the night's adventures he said not a word, and when they asked where he got the sword, he only pointed in the direction of the castle and said, "Over that way." They thought he had found it, and asked no more questions. When Niels left the castle, he shut the door behind him, and it closed with such a bang that the porter woke up. He could scarcely believe his eyes when he saw the three headless giants lying in a heap in the courtyard, and could not imagine what had taken place. The whole castle was soon aroused, and then everybody wondered at the affair. It was soon seen that the bodies were those of the king's great enemies, but how they came to be there and in that condition was a perfect mystery. Then it was noticed that the drinking horn was empty and the sword gone, while the princess reported that half of her handkerchief and one of her slippers had been taken away. How the giants had been killed seemed a little clearer now, but who had done it was as great a puzzle as before. The old knight who had charge of the castle said that in his opinion it must have been some young knight who had immediately set off to the king to claim the hand of the princess. This sounded likely, but the messenger who was sent to the court returned with the news that no one there knew anything about the matter. "We must find him, however," said the princess, "for if he is willing to marry me, I cannot in honor refuse him after what my father put on the horn." She took counsel with her father's wisest men as to what ought to be done, and among other things they advised her to build a house beside the highway and put over the door this inscription: "Whoever will tell the story of his life may stay here 3 nights for nothing." This was done, and many strange tales were told to the princess, but none of the travelers said a word about the 3 giants. In the meantime, Niels and the others tramped on towards Rome. Autumn passed, and winter was just beginning when they came to the foot of a great range of mountains towering up to the sky. "Must we go over these?" said they. "We shall be frozen to death or buried in the snow." "Here comes a man," said Niels. "Let us ask him the way to Rome." They did so, and were told that there was no other way. "And is it far yet?" said the old people, who were beginning to be worn out by the long journey. After they had got time to rest themselves, the princess's steward came to hear their story. "You saw what was written above the door," he said to the father. "Tell me who you are and what your history has been." "Dear me, I have nothing of any importance to tell you," said the old man. "And I am sure we should never have made so bold as to trouble you at all if it hadn't been for the youngest of our 2 sons here." "Never mind that," said the steward. "You are very welcome if you will only tell me the story of your life." "Well, well, I will," said he, "but there is nothing to tell about it. I and my wife have lived all our days on a moor in North Jutland until this last year, when she took a fancy to go to Rome. We set out with our 2 sons, but turned back long before we got there, and now are on our way home again." So he told his story much the same as the others did, and thought he had escaped all further trouble, when Rasmus put in his word. "You've forgotten something, Niels," he said. "You remember you found a sword near here that night I shot the stag." "Where is the sword?" said the princess. "I know," said the steward. "I saw where he laid it down when they came in." And off he went to fetch it, while Niels wondered whether he could make his escape in the meantime. Before he had made up his mind, however, the steward was back with the sword, which the princess recognized at once. "Where did you get this?" she said to Niels. Niels was silent, and wondered what the usual penalty was for a poor sheep farmer's son who was so unfortunate as to deliver a princess and carry off things from her bedroom. "See what else he has about him," said the princess to the steward, and Niels had to submit to be searched. Out of one pocket came a gold-embroidered slipper, and out of the other the half of a gold-hemmed handkerchief. "That is enough," said the princess. "Now we needn't ask any more questions. Send for my father, the king, at once." "Please let me go," said Niels. "I did you as much good as harm at any rate." "Why, who said anything about doing harm?" said the princess. "You must stay here till my father comes." The way in which the princess smiled when she said this gave Niels some hope that things might not be bad for him after all. And he was yet more encouraged when he thought of the words engraved on the horn, though the last line still seemed too good to be true. However, the arrival of the king soon settled the matter. The princess was willing, and so was Niels, and in a few days the wedding bells were ringing. Niels was made an earl by that time, and looked as handsome as any of them when dressed in all his robes. Before long the old king died, and Niels reigned after him. But whether his father and mother stayed with him, or went back to the moor in Jutland, or were sent to Rome in a carriage and four, is something that all the historians of his reign have forgotten to mention.